My name is Sophie, I'm 33 years old, and the day I came home from the hospital after 3 weeks in the ICU following an emergency C-section, my mother-in-law was sitting in my kitchen wearing my apron, my 2-year-old was calling another woman mommy, and my husband was nowhere to be found. I stood in the doorway of my own house with a scar across my abdomen that was still healing, 22 pounds lighter than I had been the last time I walked through that door, and I looked at the woman standing at my stove and I thought, very clearly and very quietly, every single one of you has made a catastrophic mistake. I didn't say a word, I walked to my bedroom, I closed the door, and I made 3 phone calls. Those 3 phone calls changed everything. If you have ever been at your most vulnerable and discovered that the people who were supposed to protect you were busy replacing you, stay with me, subscribe to Unspoken Truth, because what happened next is something I need you to hear. I married James Whitfield when I was 27 years old, we had dated for 3 years. He was an architect, steady and quiet in the way that felt like safety when I was 24 and still figuring out what I needed from another person. His mother Barbara had made her feelings about me clear from the first dinner, not with cruelty exactly, with the particular brand of politeness that functions as exclusion. She answered my questions with the minimum number of words possible. She directed conversation toward James when I was mid-sentence. She referred to James's previous girlfriend Amanda in the present tense for 2 years after we started dating. Amanda would know how to do this. Amanda used to make that for James, Amanda, 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 a name deployed like a measurement I was always falling short of. James told me I was imagining it. He said his mother was just reserved, just old-fashioned, just needed time. I had been hearing just for 3 years by the time we got engaged, and I had learned to file it in the category of things I couldn't change and had chosen to accept because the rest of it, the life James and I were building together, felt worth the cost. Our son Noah was born 14 months after the wedding, a Tuesday in October, easy pregnancy, straightforward delivery. Barbara arrived at the hospital before I had been moved out of the delivery room and spent 4 hours holding Noah while I lay in the bed with a cup of ice chips that kept going empty because everyone was too busy cooing over the baby to notice. I refilled it myself by walking to the nurse's station in a hospital gown 12 hours after giving birth. The nurse looked at me with an expression that told me she had seen this particular situation before. I filed that expression in the same category as the just. Noah was 2 years old and I was 7 months pregnant with our daughter when the situation escalated from something I managed quietly to something that required a different kind of attention. Barbara had been coming over 3 times a week since Noah was born, the same pattern Patricia had established in a story you may have heard before, the unannounced schedule, the surveillance disguised as help, except Barbara's version had a particular quality that Patricia's lacked. Barbara brought Amanda up constantly in front of Noah. She had a photo of James and Amanda on her phone that she showed Noah once when she thought I wasn't in the room. "Look," she said, "that's Daddy's special friend." Noah had looked at it with the blank curiosity of a 2-year-old who doesn't yet understand what he's being handed. I stood in the hallway outside the living room for a long moment after that, my hand on my stomach, the baby moving in the particular way she did in the afternoons, and I thought about Amanda with her present tense name and her photo on Barbara's phone and the particular campaign that had been running against me since the first dinner, quiet and consistent and completely underestimated by everyone including me for too long. I told James that evening. His response was the one I had been collecting for 3 years. "Mom didn't mean anything by it. She just loves Noah, she's just being grandma, just. I opened my notes app and I added it to the record I had been keeping since Noah was 4 months old. Date, incident, James's response, a document that was now 14 pages long and that I had been maintaining with the same quiet precision that I brought to everything in my life that mattered. Our daughter Mia was born on a Thursday in March at 34 weeks. She was not supposed to come for 6 more weeks and her arrival was not gentle. My water broke at 2 in the morning. James drove me to the hospital, and what followed was the most frightening 12 hours of my life. A labor that moved too fast and then stopped. A heart rate monitor that began alarming in ways that cleared the room of everyone except the people who needed to be there. An emergency C-section decision made in under 4 minutes. A mask over my face and James's hand and then nothing. I woke up in the ICU 8 hours later. Mia was in the NICU, small and fierce and breathing on her own, which the nurses told me was remarkable for 34 weeks. I was not breathing entirely on my own for the first 48 hours. There had been complications during the surgery, bleeding that had required intervention. I had been, as my doctor put it with the careful language of someone choosing words precisely, in a serious situation for several hours. James was there when I woke up. He looked frightened in a way I had never seen on him. He held my hand and said her name, "Mia, she's okay. She's in the NICU but she's okay." And I closed my eyes and felt something release in my chest that had been locked since the alarm on the monitor. He was there for the first 2 days, and then he was there less, and then he was there in the mornings sometimes and not in the evenings, and when I asked about Noah he said his mother had him, everything was fine, I should focus on getting better, and I was too weak and too medicated and too focused on watching Mia's numbers on the NICU monitor to ask the questions I should have asked. I was in that hospital for 22 days, Mia came home 4 days before I did. James brought her, Barbara was with him. I watched them walk out of the NICU with my daughter through a window because I was still attached to enough equipment that I couldn't follow, and I pressed my hand against the glass and told myself it was fine, it was temporary, I would be home soon. I didn't know what home looked like anymore. The drive from the hospital took 23 minutes. James was quiet in a way that had a texture to it, not the comfortable quiet of a man at ease but the tight quiet of a man managing something. I noticed it and filed it and looked out the window at the March afternoon. Bare trees and pale sky and the particular exhaustion of a body that has been through something serious and is still in the early stages of understanding what that means. He pulled into the driveway and carried my bag to the door and opened it and I walked into my house and stopped. The smell was different, something floral and unfamiliar layered over the smell of my home that I had been dreaming about for 3 weeks, the kind of smell that belongs to another person's habits, their products, their presence. The kitchen was clean in a way that wasn't my kind of clean, the dish towels were folded differently. There were flowers on the table that no one had told me about, and Barbara was standing at my stove in my apron stirring something in my pot with my spoon. Noah was on the living room floor with a woman I had never seen before. She was maybe 30, dark hair, relaxed in my living room in the particular way of someone who had been there long enough to stop noticing the furniture. She was playing with Noah and Noah was laughing and then Noah looked up at me, his mother, the person who had grown him inside her body and pushed him into the world and spent 2 years learning the specific geography of his personality, and he looked at me with the brief uncertain look of someone seeing a person they half remember and then turned back to the woman on the floor and said, "Play," and the woman smiled and kept playing. I stood in the doorway of my own house and I understood several things simultaneously, each one arriving with the clarity of something that has been true for a long time and is only now being seen directly. I turned to James. He was looking at the floor. "Who is she?" I said, and my voice was very quiet and very steady and James looked up at me with the expression of a man who had been hoping this moment would somehow not arrive. "She's just helping out," he said. "Mom needed someone to help with the kids while you were." "What's her name?" I said. A pause that lasted too long. "Amanda," he said. "I want to tell you what happened in my body in that moment because I think it matters. I had been awake for 4 hours after 22 days in a hospital. I had a healing incision across my abdomen. I was 22 pounds lighter than the last time I had stood in that doorway, and I felt something move through me that was not rage exactly, it was older and quieter than rage. It was the feeling of a person who has been keeping a 14-page document for 2 years and has just arrived at the last entry. I looked at Barbara at my stove, I looked at Amanda on my floor with my son, I looked at James looking at the floor, and I thought, you have all been in this house for 3 weeks building something you assumed I was too sick to dismantle. I was wrong about a lot of things in my marriage, I was not wrong about that. I walked to my bedroom, I closed the door, and I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my sister Grace, who had been trying to visit me in the hospital for 3 weeks and had been told by James each time that I was resting and couldn't have visitors. I had not known this until day 18 when Grace called the hospital directly and a nurse put her through to my room and Grace's voice broke in a way that told me she had been frightened for a long time and had been kept from me while she was frightened. I told Grace to come now, bring her husband, bring a bag, I need you in this house tonight. The second call was to my friend Renee, who was a family attorney in Atlanta and had been my closest friend since college. I told her what I had come home to, I told her about the document, I told her about Amanda, I told her everything in 11 minutes while sitting on the edge of my bed with my hand pressed against my incision because it ached when I sat upright for too long. Renee was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Sophie, I need you to do something before anyone in that house realizes what's happening. Tell me, your phone, your document, everything you have, send it to me right now, and then I need you to walk through that house tonight and take note of everything that has changed, every object that isn't yours, every sign of how long she has been there. I need the picture as complete as possible. I already know what I'm going to find. I know you do, send me the document first." I sent it, all 14 pages, and then I made the third call, to my doctor, because I needed to understand exactly what my medical record showed about the severity of what I had been through, and I needed it in writing, and I needed it quickly. My doctor called me back in 20 minutes, she had been my OB for both pregnancies, she knew me, she listened to what I was describing without interrupting and at the end she said, Sophie, I'm going to have my office send you a complete summary of your hospitalization by end of day, and I want you to know that what you experienced was serious. Anyone who suggests otherwise is not being truthful. I thanked her and hung up and sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet of my own room and took 3 slow breaths the way the hospital's respiratory therapist had taught me, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the body remember it knows how to do this. Then I stood up and opened the door. Grace arrived 40 minutes later with her husband Tom and a bag and the particular energy of a woman who had been worried for 3 weeks and had been kept away and was now here and was not leaving. She walked in and looked at the living room and looked at me and looked at Amanda and then looked back at me with a question in her eyes that I answered with a small shake of my head, not yet. Barbara left an hour after Grace arrived. She kissed Noah and said goodbye to Amanda with the warmth she had never once directed at me in 6 years of trying. She looked at me on her way out with the expression of a woman recalibrating. Something had shifted in the room when Grace arrived and Barbara felt it even if she couldn't name it. Amanda left 30 minutes after Barbara. James walked her out and I watched from the kitchen window as they stood in the driveway for 4 minutes having a conversation that James did not want to have in the house, his body language tight and apologetic in equal measure. That night after the children were asleep, Grace and Tom stayed in the guest room and James and I sat at the kitchen table and I placed my phone between us with the document open. I didn't say anything for a moment. I let him look at it, 14 pages, 2 years of dates and incidents and his responses, every she didn't mean it, every you're imagining it, and then Amanda's name at the bottom, March 14th, came home from hospital, Amanda in my house with my son, James knew. How long, I said. He looked at the table. How long has she been coming here? 10 days, he said. Mom thought it would help, with the kids, while you were. While I was fighting for my life, I said, and my voice was so steady it surprised both of us. While I was in the ICU, you brought your ex-girlfriend into our home and let her spend 10 days with our children and you didn't tell me. He didn't answer because there was no answer that worked. I have a meeting with Renee on Friday, I said. I think you should find somewhere to stay until then. He looked up. Sophie. I'm not asking, James, I'm telling you what's going to happen next. You can make this harder than it needs to be or you can make it clean. But either way it's going to happen and either way I have 14 pages of documentation and a medical record that shows exactly what I was going through while this was happening in my house, so I would think carefully about which version of this you want. He left that night. He stayed at his mother's, which told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalties had always lived. The divorce took 8 months. It was not easy and James made it harder than it needed to be for the first 3 months until Renee presented the full picture to his attorney and the calculation changed, the documentation, the medical records, the 10 days of Amanda in the house while I was in the ICU, the pattern of Barbara's behavior toward me across 6 years, all of it laid out in sequence, clean and specific and impossible to reframe. I kept the house. I have primary custody of Noah and Mia. James has them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings and he shows up for that, consistently and on time, which is more than I expected and which matters to my children, so I acknowledge it without qualification. Barbara sees the children once a month at a neutral location. She is quieter now, smaller in the way that people become when the power they held no longer works. She brought Noah a birthday present last month and said to me, very quietly, on her way out, I wasn't fair to you, and I looked at her and said, no, you weren't, and I let that be the end of it because I don't need more than the truth acknowledged. I never did. Amanda is not part of the story anymore. I don't know where she is and I don't need to. She was an instrument in something that was already broken and I don't hold instruments responsible for the hands that use them. Mia is 2 years old now. She is small and fierce and relentless in the particular way of people who arrived in the world fighting and never forgot that they know how to. Noah is 4. He calls me mommy with the complete confidence of a child who has never had reason to doubt where home is. I make sure of that every single day. I repainted the kitchen last summer, a deep green that makes the room feel like something alive. I bought a new apron, blue linen, mine. I cook in it on Sunday mornings while the children sit at the table and the house smells like something I chose and everything in it is exactly where I put it. If you are somewhere right now at your most vulnerable, in a hospital bed or a hard season or a moment where you cannot fight back yet, and you are discovering that the people who were supposed to hold things together while you were down were busy doing something else entirely, I want you to hear this. Your vulnerability is not your weakness, it is their indictment. What people do when they think you can't see is the truest possible picture of who they are. You are allowed to come home. You are allowed to stand in your own doorway and understand what you are looking at. You are allowed to be both shattered and strategic at the same time. Those things are not opposites. They are exactly what survival looks like from the inside. The 3 phone calls I made from my bedroom that afternoon were the most important calls of my life, not because they fixed anything immediately, because they put the truth in the hands of people who knew what to do with it, and sometimes that is the only move available to you, and it is enough. It is always enough to start there. My name is Sophie, I'm 33 years old, and my kitchen is deep green and my apron is blue linen, and on Sunday mornings my children sit at my table while I cook and the house smells like everything I chose. Every single thing in it is mine. Thank you for listening, take care of yourself, and remember that coming home is not the end of the story, sometimes it's exactly where it begins.